Welcome to the Seed Podcast, a podcast about climate justice and solidarity between the global North and South. My name is Linnea, and with me in the studio we have Sigrid, Funani, and Akuzike. We are this year's Seed participants of 2025 and 2026. During the next episodes, we'll explore the topics climate justice, food security, and food sovereignty in a Norwegian and Malawian context. Enjoy! In the last episode, we heard from Malawian farmers on how they are affected by climate change and how they are adapting their food systems. In this episode, we will see it from the Norwegian perspective. How are we affected by climate change in Norway? And how is the Norwegian food system adapting to climate change? Sigrid, will you introduce us to the Norwegian food system?
What is a food system? A food system is the journey food takes from seed to your dinner table. It includes everything from how food is produced, processed, transported, sold, and finally eaten, including the people, policies, and environments they are affected by on its way to your stomach. The Norwegian food system today is highly industrialized. Unlike countries such as Malawi, where a large part of the population grow their own food. The journey from seed to table is much more complex for a general Norwegian. For example, when milk is produced on a Norwegian farm, it doesn't go directly to consumers. A tanker truck collects the milk, transports it to a processing facility where it is treated and packaged, and then it is distributed to grocery stores, where consumers finally buy it. Because so few Norwegians are farmers, people's relationship to food and food production has become quite distant. Many don't know what happens to food before it reaches the store, what work the farmer has put in, or how the product finally gets there. Historically, Norway looked more like Malawi, with many small farms spread across the country. But over the past decades, the number of farmers has dropped significantly. This decline is due to low profitability, heavy workloads, and challenging working conditions. Today, Norwegian agriculture is dominated by livestock production and the cultivation of feed crops for animals. This means that much of the farmland is not used to grow food directly for people, but instead to sustain meat and dairy production. An example of this is in Telemark, which has a lot of fertile soil traditionally used to grow vegetables, but an increasing amount of hectares are used to grow grass for livestock. This shift has led to more monocultures and cash crop farming, where farmers focus on producing what is most profitable rather than what's best for the soil health, biodiversity, or local food needs. Farmers are increasingly pressured to make economic decisions instead of ecological or traditional ones. Over time, this weakens the resilience of the food system and reduces diversity in what is grown in our country. Being a farmer today comes with both challenges and responsibility. Many farmers struggle with high levels of debt and financial uncertainty. To stay economically viable, they often feel forced to expand their farms. This has led to a structural shift. Fewer farms, but much larger ones. As smaller farms disappear, land in some areas is abandoned. This leads to overgrowth of vegetation and the loss of cultivated landscapes that have been maintained for generations. At the same time, farming remains an essential and meaningful profession. Farmers play a crucial role in food production, cultural heritage, and land stewardship. Norway currently imports around 60% of the food we consume. This means we depend heavily on land, resources, and labor in other countries to feed our own population. In other words, Norway is only about 40% self-sufficient. This number does not include valid numbers on livestock feed imported from other countries. The actual percentage of self-sufficiency is therefore lower. This creates vulnerability in the case of global crises such as conflicts, pandemics, or climate disruptions. Food imports could become unstable. At the same time, relying on imports put pressures on other countries' resources. Increasing self-sufficiency is not just about national security, it's also about global responsibility. From a solidarity perspective, Norway should reduce its reliance on resources from other countries. This is the foundation of a sustainable and just food system.
Let's hear from Tor Jacob Solberg, the leader of the Norwegian Smallholder Farmers Association. The Norwegian food system is highly organized. It's run by the cooperatives like Tine, Nortura and Felleskjøpet. The cooperatives run as market regulators to ensure that the farmers get a fair price on their products over time. We have a mix of large-scale and small-scale farming in our country. Small-scale family-run farms are really important because they secure the food systems around where they live, but they also tend to the resources that are local, opposed to large-scale farms, which don't really care about where they are or what they do as long as they get profit. In our Farmers Association, we prefer the small-scale farming because it has proven to be the most robust. A lot of farmers still quit their farming because of economy. We see that the same way as the insects disappear, the farmers also disappear. If we can ensure and work for a good food system, then the insects may come back, and with them the farmers. In the future, we want the politicians to be honest with us, and we would love to see more interest from people around what they want to eat. Because we find that Norwegians want to eat healthy and they want to know where the food is coming from.
At its simplest, fertilizer is anything added to soil to help plants grow. It provides essential nutrients, especially nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, often called NPK, the building blocks of plant life. For so many years, these nutrients came naturally through compost, manure, and ecological cycles. But after World War II, agriculture changed dramatically. Scientists found a way to produce nitrogen artificially, using an energy-intensive process powered largely by fossil fuels. This gave rise to what we now call synthetic fertilizers. And yes, these fertilizers can boost crop yields quickly, but they also raise important questions. What happens when farmers become dependent on expensive inputs? What happens to the soil over time? And can something closely tied to fossil fuels really be the future of food security? We are going to explore fertilizer not just as a tool, but as a system shaping farming, livelihoods, and the environment.
We've already talked about fertilizer, and we cannot talk about fertilizer in a Norwegian context without talking about Yara. With me in the studio, I have Thea, the leader of Spire, and she will enlighten us more about Yara and why their fertilizer is bad. Welcome, Thea. To start off, what is Yara?
Yara is actually the second largest producer of fertilizer in the world. And they are a Norwegian-owned company. The state owns around 36%. And also the pension fund in Norway owns 8%. So it's quite a lot on Norway in total, and it's also a Norwegian company. And they have production in over 60 countries, and they also distribute to around 140 countries. So they're kind of like all over the world with their fertilizer.
And why is their fertilizer bad?
Well, Yara produces, as mentioned, nitrogen-based fertilizer, which is the most common fertilizer. And you need fertilizers for plants to grow and to have good nutrients from the food that you eat. But the problems with the nitrogen-based fertilizer is that it's based on fossil gas and fossil energy. So it's both a lot of fossil energy
needed to produce it, but also it releases a lot of greenhouse gas emissions when it's used. So I think together, the production and the use of fertilizers contributes to around 5% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. And that's so because when it's used, it releases nitrous oxide, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas. And it causes also a lot of environmental damage when it's used from water pollution and air pollution, and also a lot of loss of biodiversity. And it also, on the long term, degrades the soil health and the soil quality, which is also really bad. So altogether, it's a lot of emissions and a lot of environmental damages that comes from the use of this kind of fertilizer.
How does this affect Norwegian agriculture in specific?
I think you need to see that in connection with the growth-oriented, industrialized, and intensive monocultural agriculture that dominates the Norwegian agriculture politics today, with the high inputs of fertilizers and pesticides being a large part of this system, which causes a lot of pollution and a lot of emissions, as mentioned. And we believe that also this type of agriculture also affects the well-being of the farmers because they have to produce a lot of food as fast as possible with low wages and long working hours. So I think it's both like the social sustainability and the environmental sustainability that are impacted by this kind of way of producing food in Norway today. And I think this challenge is also with the politics favoring the big and industrial and intensive farms. It's less and less smallholders in Norway. And it's less support for the alternatives. Like if you want to try to do alternatives to this kind of farming and use less fertilizer that Yara produces, it's very difficult and it's expensive and it takes time. And that's all of things that farmers today in Norway have too little of, like time and money. That's a big challenge, I think. And it's challenging and difficult for a Norwegian farmer to move to agroecology and organic farming and so on, because it's more expensive and you have less support from the government to do so. I think it's also interesting to mention that the way that we produce food in Norway today is also very disconnected from like people in the street. They don't have a relationship to how food is produced. And I think that's also something that is connected to this growth-oriented, intensive, conventional agriculture. Most people doesn't know where the food come from. And that's also a challenge, I think, for agriculture. So we need more smallholders, more organic farming, and more alternatives that are making more people be able to contribute to the food production as well.
There are challenges with being a full-time farmer in Norway. Andy Ross, the director of Dype Røtter, a project where they do organic farming and work with refugees, will explain this further.
We want to produce organic and sustainable food, but to sell it at a fair price so that it's affordable for all. But if we try to do that, or if we do that, then the margin is really small for us. So we struggle to make a profit. I think that my experience here is that not enough people are motivated to buy more environmentally friendly foods. So we have a very small market. So we struggle in terms of sales, and it makes it really hard for us to make a profit, and it makes it really hard for us to increase our capacity in such a way that we can do more, or that we can explain what we do better. So I feel that we struggle with capacity, and we kind of run around in circles, never quite doing enough. But we are outsold at the markets substantially by people who are not selling organic vegetables and who are selling them loose, like they're selling by the kilo, basically. And they have a cheaper offer. And so the people that are wanting to buy our vegetables are the ones who are already a bit more engaged in in the ethics of what we do. The fact that we work with refugees is really important to them. The most important thing, actually. And then the second thing is the fact that we're more environmentally friendly. But yeah, it's a question of scale. But the problem that with the scale, in my experience so far in Norway at the moment, it's February and it's -8 outside, and the snow won't be properly gone until April or May, and so you have this season where nothing happens and then everything just grows at once, and it's just crazy. And if you're not using a tractor and you're having to do everything by hand, then you have such a fight on your hands to get everything in the ground. And then you have a few months that you have. June, you start to have vegetables. July, you have quite a lot of vegetables, but all the Norwegians have gone on holiday, so they're not there to buy them. And then you have great sales in August and great sales in September, and then by October things are starting to die back. So the season is so short. So if we had the same business model, but we were able to sell vegetables like 9 months of the year, for example, it would be entirely different. There's a big issue with seasonality, and the cafe was meant to be part of that solution, that we would make the vegetables in the summer, but we'd also have income in the winter. So that's the kind of idea, is trying to diversify and diversify using the same palette. We're still using the vegetables, but we're also hopefully moving ourselves up the supply chain. We're not just selling potatoes by the kilo, we're using those potatoes to make soup, which we're selling at a much higher price point. There's been this huge change, but then you've gone from farmers knowing how to farm to a lot of people not knowing how to farm in 2 generations. The same thing happened in Scotland, but over a longer period of time. And so I think there's a real value in all the stuff that's happening here in showing people how to grow food, because you never know and you can't have food sovereignty if nobody knows how to grow it.
Farming can be both rewarding and challenging. According to the Norwegian Agriculture Agency, farmers in Norway often deal with a short growing season, steep landscape, and cold weather, which makes production more difficult than in many countries. At the same time, reports from statistics show that Norway, there are fewer farmers than before. But the farmers that remain are larger and require more investment and modern equipment. Many farmers must also follow strict environmental rules and animal welfare standards set by the government and supported by groups like the Norwegian Farmers and Smallholder Union. This means being a farmer in Norway is not just about growing food. It also means about adapting to nature, managing cost, and working within national policies.
To end this episode, let's hear some wise words from Guri.
If you wake up one morning and the world is just, you will probably not be better off. As a Norwegian, we live on top of the world in every sense, and I think more adults in Norway should be told that as well.
We are all dependent on agriculture, because we are all dependent on food. Our food systems are tied together. Trade, unrest, market changes, and climate shocks affect us all. But we all have different on dealing with them. And already vulnerable communities are often the one affected the most. That is why it is important for us to stand in solidarity with each other and fight for climate justice and food systems built to empower the farmer and the people, not the big corporations. This episode was made with the support and collaboration of Spire, Point of Progress, and Vilja Oscar. Thank you for assisting us in bringing this project to life. Thank you. Zikomo, tusen takk.